that entire day up at the summit area, which was probably common throughout Southern California, there was two small incidents where we interacted with the public. One was a small fire, and one was someone calling of a possible fire. And they were separated for about 3 or 4 hours. But what I noticed during those two incidents is that the people were very tense and on edge. So the first incident turned out to be a very small spot fire, accidental cause. There was nothing seen coming in. This was about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. But the resident was waving us in very frantically to get to where she knew the fire was. And we got to the site, the fire was out. But that resident, knowing the conditions of the day, knowing where we were in a wildland area, you could tell that person was stressed in that this small fire, if it had taken off, they knew the potential. So there was an element of worry and stress in the upper Hawaii area. Later, around 5 o'clock in the evening, then there was another call from a resident reporting what they thought might have been smoke in the area. It turned out to be just a tractor in a field returning to the barn after a day's work, and that dust that was in the air, being pushed by some east wind, looked like smoke. And when we talked to the resident and gave them comfort that, okay, we found out it's just smoke, or dust from a tractor. But there was stress in that person's viewpoint. And that call was just maybe an hour before the Thomas event. So then we're back at station, and anybody that works in a firehouse knows that you normally get your calls through the dispatching system. On occasion, depending on the locality, you might have somebody phone in directly on their telephone to your house phone. Anytime somebody calls in on the house phone and it ends up being information of an incident, you know that it didn't come through dispatch, it came directly from somebody in the area. So some things happened simultaneously for us at Station 20 that evening. We got a phone call to the station from somebody at the college. Our firefighter answered and said, "Are you aware of the fire on the hillside?" At the same time, our pulse point information on our phones is going off, showing that Ventura County Dispatch is sending a full brush response to someplace in the area. So we told the caller, we don't know about it, but we're on our way. We knew the conditions, it's hot, windy. We're going to put that phone down and just get in the vehicle and take off. So there were some assumptions that with this dispatch going on at the same time for a brush fire in the area, we thought it was one and the same. As we got on the engine, we looked at all the information on the call being dispatched and saw that it was being dispatched to an area outside Santa Paula, but about 2 miles different from where our caller had just called from. So we knew that either there's two fires, which could happen at the same time, or there was one fire and the initial reports just weren't correct. So we advised our dispatch that we were responding to the college area, which was Thomas Aquinas College, for a report of a fire. While at the same time that other dispatch is going, the whole dispatched alarm is going to Dickinson Canyon, which is just behind Santa Paula to the north. Upon leaving the station, just coming around the bend, which is about 2.5 miles away from the actual start of the fire, we came around the bend and then we got a visual, which was a large head of smoke, but the odd thing is it was being held low to the ground. And what it was with the strong east winds, this large head of smoke was being held down pretty low. So seeing it, we're like the first ones, we got a visual of the fire or one fire. So we let Ventura know that we did have a visual on the fire. And even from 2.5 miles out, it was a large enough head that we started a second alarm. So we didn't even have to get there. We just knew that it was going to take at least a second alarm to get going. So we continued down the curves, we call it, which is a mountainous area, to get towards the college where the reported fire was. As we came around the bend to where the college was, now we could visually see again that there was no fire around the college. So we knew, what we saw from a distance is going to be further to the south. So as we continued down around a mountainous area, we came around a clearing right in front of the college heading south, and then we came in view again of the fire. So initially I could tell, having worked at that area before, that the fire was in a canyon called Anlauf Canyon, A-N-L-A-U-F. So we continued to travel, and then once we came up to a little rise in the roadway, Highway 150, we could look directly, what I would say, east, right into the canyon. And that's where we had our first visual of what to me was the entire canyon aflame. So we're the first engine. Normally you get a fire and you maybe get there, in advance and find out, okay, we got a good acre, maybe 2 acres, 5 acres. That initial view of the entire canyon aflame, which I'm not trying to make it sound like more than what it was, but it truly looked like what I envisioned hell to look like. The entire canyon was just aflame. And we estimated at that initial time that the fire was already at 50 acres. So we continued to travel down to get to the entrance that goes towards Anlauf Canyon. We have to cross a creek. There's a little bridge there. And I knew there was already work to be done. I had already asked for a second alarm. A lot of people coming behind me in time. But I knew also that being the first on scene, we had to stop and get a game plan going. Really, it was going to be easier for me to get to work, and I thought, let's just go get to work. I knew there was one structure that was going to be impacted immediately, and I knew I could go there and get to work. But I had to tell the driver, the engineer, at that bridge, which crosses the Santa Paula Creek, I said, stop right here. And we needed to be an incident commander and make a general plan, and I knew that I would be handing that off to a chief officer very quickly. So at that bridge, we looked on our computer screen. We could see where the fire was in that canyon, where it was going, and it was pretty much coming down canyon and heading south. So we could see on our screen, okay, it's going to impact Steckel Park, and further south, there's a big camping area called KOA, and some residences that are spread out amongst some agricultural orchards and such. And that's where the fire was going to be going to. So probably 8 minutes into the incident for us, being at that bridge, I requested 4 strike teams. And I honestly thought, that's just going to get us started, but I could probably ask for 10 strike teams. And I always remembered an incident that it also was in Sector 20 many years ago, where we had a captain on scene that ordered something like 20 strike teams initially. And everybody out in the office or dispatch was saying, is he crazy? What's he doing? But they weren't out at the site where this captain was. And that incident did turn out to be an incident where everything was needed that captain wanted. But it came in time. So now that I'm in that position, I'm thinking I could easily call, just like that captain did, and ask for 50 strike teams. But I felt, realistically, let me just get some equipment coming, something that's manageable. And 4 strike teams is 20 engines with the 10 that we already have coming, 30 engines with a number of helicopters, hand crews already en route, part of that second alarm. That's what we had coming. And in retrospect, none of it was going to make a difference. Because in retrospect, after the events that followed, the fire was like a freight train and just took off. Before we knew it, it was through the KOA, even though we had engines there. And they did a great job protecting actual residences that did not burn. But the camping KOA suffered a lot of loss. And then from that point on, once the fire jumped Highway 150, it was on its way towards Santa Paula and on its way towards Ventura. Initially seeing the fire at 50 acres in that canyon, moving down canyon, I knew the potential right then was great for what I would call a significant incident. But I honestly thought, okay, this is going to be a couple of days, maybe could turn into a week campaign, but I never would have guessed that it was going to be weeks into months, right into January of the coming year. I don't ever want the public to feel sorry for us, but amongst ourselves, there are times when you take in a lot of smoke during those firefights. And that younger firefighter, I realized during those firefights, when you're coughing and hacking and almost throwing up, I go, this is where he's taking this hit of possible cancer down the road. That was my thought. It really was. And there's nothing I could do about it, really, Because there's other options. Oh, sure, we know we could put a breathing apparatus on for a short period of time. We could cover our face. Bottom line, everybody that night and in the days to come is going to take intense smoke and heat. There's nothing you can do about it. That's the profession. Those are the moments that you're exposed to that. And for my two guys, the two Steves, Steve Swindle and Steve Buckles, they performed admirably without complaint, and I appreciated that. I'll always remember that. Having been there in the beginning, I was proud knowing that to be there in the beginning and know in retrospect later this huge army that came and followed. And I'm proud of the fact that all those individuals, men and women of the fire service, civilians throughout all the communities that helped their neighbors, people, that's what I'm most proud of, the fact that in this great emergency, people in their profession and people in their private lives took care of business. Stories that will never be told on camera, but people did what they needed to do. I think I'm proud that occurred behind me with that incident. I know that if you want to look at it this way, this is probably the first time in such a significant event that I was part of that point of the spear. But so many people worked so hard afterwards behind that. And I'm proud of all those people. And I bring that up because I always told myself if anybody ever wanted to talk or ask about my experience there, part of the reason I talk about those people is because then we had somebody like Corey Iverson. That I didn't even know. That came to my town, my community. And he didn't go home. And we had a civilian that lost their lives in the Weather Canyon incident. It was a victim of, and then so many victims that came in the floods afterwards. And so for me, being first on scene, I had to go to Corey's funeral. I mean, so many people were going to be there. Would it make a difference? No, it wouldn't make a difference. But I told my wife, I was the first one there. I have to be there. He was to follow with this great army behind me that I had to pay tribute personally to being there. And I was just another face in the crowd there, but I had to be there. So maybe that's what I'm most proud of, that people that came afterwards to be a part of that army.